It's time to start gardening. Let's talk about the characteristics of a good garden location. The first requirement is sunlight. The amount of sun needs to match the needs of the plants that will be grown in this space. For the majority of plants that are grown in gardens, it's important to have good sunlight during a substantial portion of the day, since plants need sunlight to grow. It's important to note trees, buildings, and other obstructions that cast shade at different times of the day and year. Vegetable gardens require full sunlight for several hours a day, as do many annual and perennial plants. The exception to this would be, of course, gardens consisting of plants that prefer partial or full shade. If your location is lacking sunlight, it is still possible to have a garden, but you'll have to be more selective in your search for plants to find those that will cope with lower light levels. Another requirement is water. Plants are like Goldilocks in their water needs. You want to make sure there's enough water, but not too much. As long as you're sure to avoid locating your garden in an area with poor drainage, the biggest concern for gardeners is typically being able to provide water to plants on a regular basis, because dry periods can slow plant growth and leave plants looking sad and wilted. Ensuring that your garden has easy access to water will help your plants stay healthy and vibrant. There are different ways to water plants, including watering cans, hoses, sprinklers, and irrigation systems. If you have a small container garden or a few plants that need just occasional watering, you can probably do well with watering can or sprinkler wand at the end of a hose. A larger garden or one that has thirstier plants will probably need a more developed irrigation system for watering. Be sure to consider how far your garden is from the nearest spigot or water source. For several years, my vegetable garden was more than 100 feet away from our spigot, and I needed to drag multiple hoses across the yard in hot weather for occasional watering, and then roll them back up whenever the lawn needed to be mowed. The amount that you need to water will depend on a few things, including air temperatures and recent rainfall amounts, the characteristics of your soil, which we'll discuss later, and how much water your plants demand. Vegetables typically need to receive water regularly to be able to stay productive. You'll definitely want to have in place for supplemental watering if you're growing vegetables. Newly planted or transplanted gardens will need regular watering too. However, many perennial plants may not need much in the way of supplemental water because they have more well-developed root systems that can access water from deeper in the soil. In the case of perennials, it's important to match the plants to the amount of water that's available throughout the year. If you are unable to water your garden plants, or if you simply don't want the hassle, be sure to select plants that can tolerate drier conditions. You'll want to be sure that your garden area has good soils because soil provides nearly everything that plants need to live. Soil contains many nutrients that are essential to plant growth, and soils retain the water that plants need to grow. A later section will dig much deeper into the topic of soils, and I'll describe how you can get your soil tested to assess how good your soils are for plant growth, and ways that you can improve the condition of your soils. Although most gardens are in the ground, there are alternatives that allow you to make up for challenging locations and soils. Raised garden beds extend above ground level and can be good solutions when soil conditions may limit plant growth. By being higher off the ground, raised beds can also be particularly good in areas with rocky or compacted soils that are hard for roots to penetrate. Raised beds also warm up more quickly in the spring, which can be a big benefit in cold climates. Containers and pots also provide many opportunities for gardening above ground level and can be particularly effective in smaller spaces. Lastly, you'll want to make sure that your garden is in a good location for you. We've already talked about the importance of thinking about your garden location relative to a water source. You'll also want to think about your garden location relative to other aspects of your life. You'll want to make sure that the gardens that need more tending, such as vegetable gardens, are reasonably easy to get to. For example, if your intention is to grow herbs for your kitchen, then you'll want those plants just outside of the nearest door leading to your kitchen. It's too easy to let your garden become a weed field when you don't see it on a regular basis. Similarly, consider where you will store your garden tools. It's a lot harder to summon the energy to go work in the garden if you have to walk across the entire yard every time you need to grab a new tool. Be sure to account for other things that might interfere with your desire to garden in a particular place. For example, if you're designing a new garden in an area of your yard, consider the location of that garden relative to how you walk through your yard. You don't want to install a new garden only to realize that it's in the way of you moving efficiently from one point to another.